Atheist millionaire Ethan Walker fired the new maid for teaching his twins to pray, and from that moment, the peace inside his mansion cracked like thin glass. He thought it was a small issue, something he could end with a command, but he was wrong. The fear in the maid's eyes, the sudden silence from his sons, and the strange heaviness in the air told him something was not right. That night, he walked through his big house, hearing nothing but his own footsteps, yet he felt as if something was following him, something he could not see. His twins refused to speak to him. The maid packed her bags quietly, and the whole house felt colder than ever. Ethan believed he had everything under control, but he did not know that the real trouble had just begun, and when he finally saw how his sons reacted to losing the only person who understood their pain, his heart shook in a way he had never felt before. Something was about to happen in that mansion, something tied to pain, to faith, and to a truth he had spent years trying to bury. The night was quiet inside the Walker mansion. Quiet in a way that felt heavy, quiet in a way that carried pain. The tall windows showed the soft lights of Austin, Texas, but inside the house, everything felt dark. Ethan Walker sat alone in his office, staring at old papers he did not care about, drinking cold coffee, and thinking of nothing that could bring comfort. Ever since his wife Michelle died, the house had stopped feeling like home. It looked beautiful on the outside, but it felt empty on the inside. His 10-year-old twins, Caleb and Mason, lived in that silence every day. Caleb walked through the halls with slow steps, always looking at the floor, never speaking unless someone asked him something. Mason tried to smile, tried to act brave, but every night he cried into his pillow when he thought no one was listening. The house was full of toys, games, new clothes, and bright lights, yet it carried a sadness that no money could hide. On a warm Monday morning, the heavy gates opened and a new maid stepped inside. Her name was Angela Brooks, a simple woman with soft eyes and calm hands. She carried a small bag and wore a clean uniform, nothing fancy, but her presence felt gentle. When she entered the mansion, she felt the cold air, not from the temperature, but from the sadness, sitting quietly in every corner. Ethan met her briefly in the dining room. He stood tall, serious, and distant. His voice was low and sharp. He told her the rules, told her to work hard, keep the house clean, and avoid making noise. He did not ask about her life, did not speak about kindness, did not speak about comfort. He wanted a worker, nothing more. Angela nodded politely and followed his instructions, but she could already see something he could not. She saw Caleb slowly walking behind his father, holding his hands together as if hiding fear. She saw Mason standing close to the table, trying to smile but failing. She saw how both boys watched their father with confused eyes, eyes that were begging for a little warmth, a little attention, a little love. During her first week, Angela moved through the rooms with quiet steps. She dusted the tables, washed the dishes, folded the clothes, and prepared simple meals, just the way Ethan liked. But while she worked, she watched the twins closely. She noticed things that nearly broke her heart. She saw how Caleb never laughed, how he always sat near the window looking at the sky, as if waiting for someone to come back. She saw how Mason always stood near his brother, almost protecting him, almost trying to give him strength. Every evening, when Ethan returned from work, the whole house changed. It became quieter, tighter, harder to breathe. The boys stood straight, almost afraid to speak, and Ethan walked past them without a smile. He cared for them, yes, but his love was locked inside his grief, and grief had become a chain around his heart. One night, after Angela finished her cleaning for the day, she walked down the hallway toward her room. As she passed the twins' room, she heard soft voices. She stopped and listened. It was Mason whispering, his voice shaky. "I miss Mommy," he said, almost crying. Caleb whispered back. Me too. I wish she was here. Angela felt her chest grow tight. She pushed the door open a little and saw the boys sitting on their bed, holding each other like two small birds hiding from a storm. She stepped inside quietly. Boys, she said softly, are you all right? They looked up at her with surprise. No adult had ever entered their room gently. No adult had ever checked on them like that. Mason wiped his face quickly and nodded, but his eyes told the truth. Caleb looked down, trying to hide his tears. Angela sat on the edge of the bed. You can talk to me, she said. I am here to help. Mason hesitated, then whispered, Mommy used to tell us stories before we slept. Caleb added, She used to pray with us too. Angela felt something shift inside her. She smiled softly. Would you like me to tell you a story tonight? The boys nodded slowly. She told them a simple story, one about kindness and hope, one that her own mother used to tell her when she was small. When the story ended, she folded her hands together and said gently, My mother also taught me to say a small prayer before sleeping. If you want, I can teach you too. Caleb looked scared. Daddy does not like prayer, he whispered. Angela nodded with understanding. It does not have to be loud, she said. It can be a quiet talk from your heart. You can talk about your day, your feelings, or your wishes. Mason whispered, Can we ask God to help Daddy smile again? Angela felt tears in her eyes. She nodded slowly. Yes, you can. The boys knelt down beside the bed. Their small voices were soft and tender. God, please help Daddy smile again. Please help us not feel lonely, and please take care of Mommy in heaven. Angela whispered, Amen with them, then tucked them in. For the first time in years, the boys slept peacefully. The next morning, something small but important happened. When Ethan came to the table, the boys looked at him with tiny smiles. Mason even asked how his night was. Ethan frowned, confused by their sudden change, but he said nothing. For the next few days, the house felt warmer. The boys laughed a little more, talked a little more, lived a little more. And every night, Angela repeated the small routine, teaching them gentle words of comfort. But the peace did not last. One evening, as Ethan walked past the twins' room, he heard whispers. He stopped. He listened. He heard Angela's soft voice. He heard the boys praying again. His face hardened, his chest tightened with anger. He did not enter the room, but he stood outside, listening, his fists clenched, his mind filled with rage he could not explain. That night, he did not sleep. Something inside him was shaking, something he did not want to face, something he believed he had buried long ago. And by the next morning, his decision was made. He would stop whatever was happening in his house. He would stop Angela. He would stop the prayers. And he would stop the small light that had just begun to return to his children's lives. The morning sun rose slowly over Austin, Texas, but inside the Walker mansion, the brightness did not enter the rooms. The air felt tight, the silence felt harder than usual, and the boys sat at the dining table with little movements, as if waiting for something bad to happen. Angela tried to keep her hands steady as she placed plates on the table, but her heart was heavy. She did not know what Ethan had heard the night before, but she could feel trouble coming. Ethan walked into the dining room with slow steps. His face had no warmth, no softness. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp, and his voice sounded like cold metal. The twins looked up at him, worried, but he did not look at them. He looked only at Angela. Angela, he said, his voice low, come with me. The boys froze. They exchanged a quick look, both of them feeling fear rise inside their small bodies. Angela wiped her hands on her apron and followed Ethan quietly. Her steps were slow, her breath uneven. She could feel the weight of his anger behind her. Ethan opened the door to his private study and waited for her to enter. When he closed the door, the sound felt heavy, like something had ended. He turned around, his face like stone. "What exactly do you think you are doing in my house?" Angela lifted her eyes slowly. "Sir, I do not understand." "Oh, you understand," Ethan said sharply. "Do not pretend." He walked a step closer, his voice growing harder. "Last night, I heard you teaching my sons to pray." Angela swallowed, but her voice remained calm. "They were sad, sir. They missed their mother. They needed comfort." "And you think prayer is comfort?" Ethan snapped. "I pay you to clean, cook, and keep the house in order, not to fill their minds with things I do not believe in." Angela shook her head softly. "I did not force them, sir. They asked questions. They needed someone to listen." "They need discipline," Ethan said. "Not bedtime stories about hope, and not prayers." His words hit the walls like stones. "I do not believe in any of that, and I will not allow it in my home." Angela's eyes softened with sadness. "Children need more than food and clothes, sir," she said quietly. "They need peace inside their hearts." Ethan stepped back, his anger rising. "Enough," he said. "After breakfast, pack your things. You are fired." The words fell over her like cold rain. Angela did not beg. She did not argue. She simply nodded once and whispered, "Yes, sir." But outside the door, two small shadows stood close to the wall, listening with trembling hearts. Caleb and Mason had followed quietly, their ears pressed to the door, their breath shaking. When they heard their father's final words, they froze. Mason covered his mouth to stop a cry from escaping. Caleb grabbed his brother's hand tightly, his small fingers cold. When Ethan left the study, the boys ran back to the dining table before he could see their tears. They sat in silence, their food untouched. Angela returned moments later, her steps slow, her eyes shiny with sadness she tried to hide. She served the food quietly. She gave the boys a small smile, a smile that said she would be all right, even when she knew she was not. The twins looked at her painfully, their hearts feeling like they were pulled in two. Ethan sat at the head of the table, pretending to focus on his newspaper. The room felt colder, heavier, and the warm pancakes on the plates had no smell, no taste. No one spoke, no one moved. When breakfast ended, Ethan left for his office upstairs. The boys remained at the table, staring at their plates. Angela collected the dishes with shaking hands. She tried to keep her face calm, but inside her chest was a quiet ache. Later in the day, Angela went to her small room and began packing her clothes into her bag. She folded each shirt slowly, touching the fabric as if it held the little moments she had shared with the twins. She had not known them for long, yet they had touched her heart deeper than she expected. As she packed, she heard soft steps at her door. When she turned, she saw Caleb standing there, his hands shaking, his eyes filled with tears he did not know how to hide. Mason stood behind him, holding onto his brother's shirt. "Are you leaving?" Mason whispered, his voice breaking. Angela knelt down slowly and pulled them close. "Your father asked me to go," she said gently. "I have to listen." "We do not want you to leave," Caleb whispered. "You make the house feel warm." Angela felt her throat tighten. She hugged them both softly. "I will miss you," she whispered. "Both of you." Mason began to cry, his small hands gripping her clothes. Caleb cried silently, pressing his face into her shoulder. That night, the mansion felt colder than it ever had. Ethan stayed in his office, drinking quietly, trying to convince himself he had done the right thing. But no matter how many times he repeated it, the image of his sons praying from the night before would not leave his mind. Angela lay on her bed, her small bag near her feet, waiting for sunrise when she would leave. She stared at the ceiling, her mind full of the boys' faces, their voices, their sadness. Caleb and Mason did not sleep at all. They sat on their bed, holding hands, their eyes red. Mason whispered, "We cannot let her go." Caleb nodded slowly. "But Daddy will not listen." Mason wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "Then we must pray louder. Maybe God will hear us. Maybe Daddy will understand." Caleb took a deep breath. "Let us try," he whispered. The two boys knelt on the carpet, their knees touching the soft floor, their fingers interlocked, their heads bowed. Their small voices filled the room gently. "God, please do not let Angela leave," Mason whispered. "She makes us happy. She helps us sleep. She makes the house feel alive." Caleb continued, his voice shaking. "And please help Daddy feel better. Please help him remember what love feels like." Their prayer floated through the hallway like soft wind. Ethan, walking upstairs with a glass of water, froze when he heard the small voices. He stood still, his hand on the railing, his heart pressing against his chest. Slowly, he followed the sound to the twins' room. He pushed the door open slightly and saw them kneeling, eyes closed, praying with all the strength in their tiny hearts. He stood there, not knowing how to breathe. Their words cut through the cold walls around his heart. Words he never expected to hear. Words that shook him deeply. "Please God," Caleb finished, "make Daddy smile again." Ethan felt something inside him crack, something he had been running from for years. He turned away quickly, hiding the tears forming in his eyes. He walked back to his office, but he could not escape the sound of their prayer. It followed him, stayed with him, and rested heavy in his mind. For the first time since Michelle died, Ethan felt something he could not explain. Fear, pain, and something deeper. Change. Morning came slowly to the Walker mansion, but the light did not remove the heaviness in the air. The sun fell through the tall windows, yet the house felt darker than before. Ethan sat at the dining table with a cup of coffee he did not touch. His eyes were tired, his jaw tight, and his thoughts scattered. He kept hearing the soft voices of his sons praying from the night before, voices that kept ringing in his ears like quiet bells he could not silence. Caleb and Mason sat across from him, their small shoulders hunched, their faces pale. They did not touch their food either. The pancakes Angela had made sat untouched on their plates, getting cold with every passing minute. Angela stood by the kitchen counter, unsure whether to approach or stay away. She had her small bag packed in her room, ready to leave once breakfast was over. The silence was thick, and for a long moment no one spoke. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "Boys, finish your food," he said, his voice sharp but shaky. "You will be late for school." Mason pushed his plate away slowly. "We do not want to eat," he whispered. Caleb lifted his eyes, tears already forming. "Not if Angela leaves." Ethan froze. The words hit him in a place he had tried to bury. He frowned, trying to look firm, but his voice weakened. "This is not your choice. This is my house." Mason's lips trembled. "But she makes us feel safe," Caleb added. "She helps us sleep. She tells us stories like Mommy did. She listens to us." Ethan looked at their sad faces, and for a moment he felt powerless. These were his children, yet he could not control their pain. He could not buy comfort for them. He could not replace the love they lost. He stood up abruptly, the chair making a soft scrape against the floor. "Enough," he said, though his voice lacked its usual strength. He turned and walked toward his study, leaving the boys sitting in silence. Angela looked at them. She saw Mason trying to hold back his tears, and Caleb wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. She walked over and knelt beside them. "It will be all right," she whispered, trying to smile. "You two must eat something." But Mason shook his head. "We are not hungry." Caleb grabbed her hand softly. "Please do not go." Angela felt her chest tighten. She hugged them both gently, their small bodies shaking against her. "I do not want to leave," she whispered, "but your father decides what happens here." Later in the day, Ethan sat at his desk in the study, staring at the same page for nearly an hour without reading a single word. His mind kept drifting back to the twins kneeling the night before. He remembered their small voices asking God to make him smile again, asking God to take care of their mother, asking God to not let Angela leave. Every word had hit his heart in a place he had kept locked for years. He rubbed his face with both hands and stood up. He could not think. He could not focus. Something inside him felt strange, something he did not understand, something that scared him. He stepped out of the study and walked down the hallway quietly. He did not know why, but his feet carried him toward the twins' room. He reached their door and paused. He heard soft whispers again. He pushed the door open slowly. Caleb and Mason were kneeling on the soft carpet, their hands folded, their heads bowed. The room was quiet, the light dim, the air filled with innocence. "God," Mason whispered, "please help Daddy understand. Please help him see that we need Angela." Caleb's voice shook. "And please help him not feel alone anymore. We know he is sad, even if he does not say it." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He stepped inside the room slowly. The boys turned around, startled. Mason's tears spilled down his cheeks. Caleb's eyes widened with worry. "Daddy," Caleb said quietly, "we were praying again." Ethan swallowed, feeling something heavy grow in his chest. "And what did you ask for this time?" he asked softly. Mason wiped his face. "We asked God to help you smile, like you used to, when Mommy was alive." Ethan felt his legs weaken. He sat on the edge of the bed slowly, unable to stand. The boys looked at him with fear and hope mixed together. Caleb moved closer. "Daddy, we do not want toys or games," he said. "We just want you to be happy again." Mason added, "And we want Angela to stay." Ethan lowered his face into his hands. Tears began to fall silently, tears he had kept hidden for years. The boys gasped softly. They had not seen their father cry since Michelle's funeral. Caleb reached out and placed his small hand on Ethan's arm. "Daddy," he whispered, "it is okay to cry." Ethan lifted his face slowly. His eyes were red, his voice trembling. "I do not know how to pray," he said. He looked at his sons, their innocent faces waiting for him, their tiny hands offering comfort that he never expected. He looked at Angela standing quietly at the doorway, her eyes filled with sadness. She stepped forward gently and said, "You do not need special words, sir, just speak from your heart." The boys moved closer, holding their father's hands. Their fingers were small and warm. "Daddy," Mason whispered, "you can say whatever you feel." Ethan breathed slowly. His chest felt heavy, but he bowed his head. "If you are really there," he whispered softly, "take care of my boys, help me be a better father, and tell Michelle that I miss her." Silence filled the room, pure silence. It felt like the whole house was listening, like something had finally broken open inside those walls. Caleb squeezed his father's hand and whispered, "Amen." Ethan let out a long breath, then pulled his sons into his arms. They held him tightly, clinging to him with love they had carried for years. He closed his eyes and let the tears fall freely, not caring who saw. Angela stepped closer, her eyes full of emotion. For the first time since she arrived, the mansion felt warm. Not because of the lights or the furniture, but because Ethan had finally opened a part of himself he thought he had lost forever. He held his sons close and whispered, "I am sorry. I am so sorry." The boys hugged him tighter, their tears mixing with his. And at that moment, something changed inside the Walker mansion. A door that had been locked for years finally opened. The days that followed felt different in the Walker mansion. The cold air that once lived in every corner began to soften. The silence that used to make the halls feel empty now felt peaceful, like the house could breathe again. Ethan walked with slower steps, calmer steps, as if the heavy weight on his shoulders had become a little lighter. His sons stayed close to him, always watching, always hoping, always waiting to see if this new peace would stay. Angela continued her work quietly, not wanting to disturb the fragile change. She cleaned the rooms, cooked simple meals, and helped the twins with their small chores. But she walked gently, as if she knew the house was healing, as if she knew one wrong word could break the moment. She did not ask Ethan about keeping her job, and Ethan did not mention it either. But she could feel something shifting, something soft in the way he looked at his sons, something new in the way he listened. One morning, Ethan sat in the living room while Caleb and Mason played with small toy cars on the floor. Before, he would sit in his office, alone, far from them. But today, he watched them with quiet eyes. He saw Mason laugh softly, a sound that had almost disappeared from the house. He saw Caleb smile gently, a smile that reminded him of Michelle. His heart felt full and tight at the same time. Angela walked in with a tray of fresh fruit. She placed it carefully on the table. Ethan looked up at her for a moment, and instead of anger or coldness, there was calm in his eyes. "Angela," he said softly, "thank you." She stopped, surprised. "Sir, you do not need to thank me. I am only doing my job." Ethan shook his head slowly. "You did more than your job," he said. "You gave my children something I did not know how to give." Angela lowered her eyes. "They only needed love, sir," she whispered, "and someone who would listen." Ethan nodded, looking at his sons again. "I forgot how to listen," he said quietly. Later that evening, the twins ran through the hallway with light steps. Mason held a drawing in his hand, a picture he had made of their family. Caleb followed him, smiling, trying to hold his own drawing straight. They burst into Ethan's study. "Daddy, look," Mason said, holding up the picture. Ethan took it gently. The drawing showed him, the twins, and Angela standing beside them. The house looked bright. The sky looked warm. Ethan's throat tightened. "It is beautiful," he whispered. Caleb held out his own paper shyly. "This one is for Mommy," he said. Ethan took the drawing with careful hands. It was a picture of Michelle sitting beside Caleb, with hearts around them. The lines were shaky, and the colors did not stay inside the shapes, but it was full of love. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the burn in his chest. "She would have loved this," he said. The boys smiled and hugged him from both sides. Angela stood quietly at the doorway, watching the moment with tears in her eyes. She did not want to interrupt. She did not want to break the new peace blooming inside the room. Later that night, the twins prepared for bed. Ethan stood at the door, watching them arrange their pillows carefully. Caleb looked up at him. "Daddy," he whispered, "are you going to leave again? Or will you stay until we sleep?" Ethan felt the question like a gentle punch to the chest. He walked inside slowly. "I will stay," he said. The boys sat up, surprised. Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, unsure, nervous. He had not done this since Michelle was alive. Mason held his father's hand. "Daddy," he whispered, "can we pray together again?" Ethan hesitated. The old part of him wanted to say no, wanted to say he did not believe, wanted to say prayer meant nothing. But when he looked into their small eyes, full of hope, full of trust, full of love, he felt something move inside him. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said softly, "we can." The boys knelt on the carpet. Ethan joined them, feeling awkward, feeling clumsy, but feeling something warm in his heart. Caleb started first. "God, thank you for today," he whispered. Mason continued, Thank you for helping Daddy feel better." Ethan closed his eyes. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Take care of my boys. They are everything I have." Angela watched from the doorway, unseen, her hands covering her mouth as she felt tears fill her eyes. She had never imagined she would witness such a moment inside this house. When the boys said "Amen," they hugged their father tightly. Ethan hugged them back, holding them as if he did not want to let go, as if he wished he had done this long ago. Over the next few weeks, the mansion changed in ways Ethan never expected. The twins laughed louder, ran freely, and spoke openly. Ethan began spending evenings with them, helping with small homework tasks, telling simple stories, even joining their small games. He still carried sadness inside him, but it no longer controlled him. He allowed Angela to stay in the mansion permanently, not because she worked well, but because she had become a light for the twins, a comfort he could not replace. One afternoon, Ethan walked into the twins' room and found them kneeling with Angela. They were praying softly. He stood there for a moment, watching, not feeling angry, not feeling confused, but feeling peace inside his heart, something he had not felt in years. He walked closer and placed his hand on Caleb's shoulder. The boys looked up at him with bright eyes. "Daddy," Mason said softly, "are you happy now?" Ethan looked at both of them, then at Angela, then around the room. He thought of Michelle, of the pain he had carried, of the love he had lost, and the love he had finally found again. He smiled, a deep, warm smile that came from the heart. "Yes," he whispered, "I am happy." The boys cheered and hugged him, shouting, "Daddy is smiling! Daddy is smiling!" Angela stepped back, her eyes wet with tears, but her heart full. She knew she had done her part. She knew she had helped this family heal. She knew she had brought back something this house thought it had lost forever. And Ethan held his children tight, whispering, "I promise I will never shut love out of this house again." For the first time since Michelle's death, the Walker mansion felt like a real home, filled with warmth, filled with love, filled with peace that money could never buy. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that money can fill a house with things, but only love can fill it with life. Sometimes, the people we push away are the ones sent to heal the parts of us we hide. Ethan thought he had everything, but he was empty until the love of his children and the kindness of a simple maid opened his heart again. This story teaches us that hope can grow in the darkest places, and that a broken home can shine again when people choose love instead of fear. Please tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and share what you learned from this story. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that touch lives. If you want more stories like this, comment the words, "More stories," and you will be among the first to receive the next powerful and emotional story. Before you go, answer these 3 questions for us in the comments. 1. Do you think Angela was right to comfort the twins, even when their father did not believe in prayer? 2. What part of the story touched your heart the most? 3. If you were Ethan, what would you have done differently? We cannot wait to read your answers.